All right, so welcome to the Intro to Apologetics, Christian Curiosity, Defending Faith um, Masterclass meeting. Uh, this is just a place for people who are kind of like wrestling. You know, Jordan Peterson has his new book, We Who Wrestle with God. I haven't read it, but like this idea of like just wrestling with it. You know, we don't want blind faith. We don't want just like, people just doing what they're supposed to do. We want them to actually think about it the same way that we would with love and things along those lines. So, uh, uh, I'm looking over here because I have a screen over here so I can read it. Perhaps the most controversial and complicated topic in existence is the question of whether or not God exists. So I think starting with this idea of whether or not God exists, people have been wrestling about for a long time. Kelsey, I was saying when I started it before I started recording, if you have any questions or any pushback or anything, you can just interrupt. You can raise your hand either way. I see you here, and then I see my screen over here. So if you have any questions or anything like that, just please feel free. So it's not just me talking. If you have something to say,
Okay.
I want it to be a place where
Thank
you're
you.
free to do it. Okay.
Thanks.
So let's address this topic from a logical perspective to argue for the existence of God, and more specifically for Christianity. So that's going to be my position on this. So apologetics, in case you didn't know what apologetics are, there was a big apologetics expert on Joe Rogan this past week, and people are like, what's apologetics? It's reasoned arguments or writings in justification of something, typically a theory or religious doctrine. So it's justification. It's like the reasons why this is what I believe. So I was thinking to myself, I kind of came up with these. I'm like, what are the big reasons why people would push back? Hi, Brad. Um, one is evil. You know, why do bad things happen to good people? I think that's a big sticking point. And I have a lot of atheists in my life. You know, most of my family back where I grew up in Pennsylvania are pretty staunch atheists. So a big thing that they bring up is like how many kids, are born with cancer or tragedies that happen to good people who volunteered for the homeless and things along those lines. So that's a big, sticking point. But what I want to I'm just putting things out there. Okay. Never going to tell you what to think. I'm just saying, like, here's things to think about. Um, why does anything good happen ever? Like, life has a lot of suffering in it. You know, like we go through bad things. We lose loved ones. We lose. We get uncomfortable. We go through pain, physical pain, emotional pain. Um, you know, there's so much suffering in the world, and I get that, but it's a valid question, I think, is why isn't the entire world nothing but suffering? Like, couldn't existence just be fire and razor blades? Like, why couldn't it? It's not. It's not because if you're an adult, you could have had a really really difficult life, but you've probably had moments, at the very least, moments of beauty and moments of joy. Like, why any of it? You know, maybe you need the light with the dark. Maybe if it was just fire and razor blades, then you wouldn't even have a reference of what evil is or what bad is. So it's like you have to have some good and then they can take it away and show you the bad or something like that. You know, like real grief only comes from when you have real love. So you have to love something in order to really feel the pain of grief. But the love was beautiful. So does that erase the love that you had? You know, that whole like, is it better to love and lost than never loved at all? Like, I don't know. I don't know, but I do think about that concept of like, why does anything good happen ever? Because it doesn't have to. So there has to be some good. We know that there's bad in the world. We know there's evil in the world, but there has to be some good too. Um, Another concept I was thinking about is free will. You know, a lot of the suffering, a lot, not all, but a lot of the suffering in the world is caused by humans. You know, and people have free will. People are choosing to do things that hurt other people. But then for things like natural disasters, I'm in Los Angeles right now. So you could say some of this is man-made, but then some of it's absolutely natural, birth defects and things like that. Part of this might be to have a very powerful personal story, like testing your faith. And we all struggle. We're all victims to some degree. But this idea of why do bad things happen where no human is at fault is really interesting. This guy, Nick Vucic, I think his name. He was born with no arms or legs, and he is a devout evangelical Christian. He said, God will use a man without arms and legs to be his hands and feet. I didn't write my story, God did. He is like really, really devout and joyous, born no arms or legs. So maybe he was chosen. This is maybe, I don't know. I don't know. But maybe he was chosen to have this struggling life so that he can bring more people to the beautiful joy that he has. He's not he's not a depressed guy. It's very interesting. I had someone on my podcast named Sydney Smith who had Charcot-Marie tooth disease, where he was actually in Utah. His legs and his feet would break all through childhood. They'd break like once or twice a year. Just broken legs, broken legs, broken legs. It's almost his whole life. Then he was like 27 years old. He was married. I think he had a kid, and they were like, look, your legs are just too mangled. You're either going to have to fuse them and be in a wheelchair, or you're going to have to amputate them. And he amputated them. And he has no feet now. And he won a bodybuilding competition. He's an Ironman triathlete. He wasn't an athlete when his legs were breaking all the time when he was a kid, but he became an Ironman triathlete. He is like one of the most inspirational people. I just talked to him last week. Like, incredible, incredible human being. But he credits God with putting him there and being that way. I was like, how are you not depressed? It's like, no, man. It's like, I'm inspiring people. I'm working hard. I'm achieving things. Like, people look to me and they go, wow, thank you for inspiring me and getting me out of whatever I have. Because I've been depressed, guys. I have been depressed. And people go, what do you have to be depressed about? You have a family, you have a career, you have this. It's like, it doesn't work like that. But it does help to look at someone like Nick or look at someone like Sydney and say, wow, like, they were dealt a worse hand. They're playing it better. How are they playing it better than I'm playing mine? Clearly, because their mental state's better. So just, I don't know. I think that's something that's interesting. More, why do bad things happen to good people? How do you find a good person? Like, how do you define, if you say you're a good person, you ask people on the street, are you a good person? Yeah, I'm a good person. Well, how do you define that? Like, you have to define good or bad. You first have to figure out what its purpose is. So like, is this a good water bottle? Like, yeah, well, it seals, doesn't have any holes in it, holds liquid. So like, yeah, I'd say it's a good water bottle because it has a purpose. The water bottle has a purpose of containing liquid. So once you know what its purpose is, then you can decide if it's good or bad. So this is a good water bottle, but this pen is not a good water bottle. It doesn't hold a lot of water. So this serves its purpose. This, whatever. My phone is not a good pillow. So to say you're a good person, you have to figure out what a person is, I think. I think you have to define what a person is. What's the purpose of a person? And then you can define if it's good or bad. But you can't really define if something's good or bad yet without some sort of metric about what is it here to do? What is it supposed to do? So I think that that's an important thing about, this whole idea of, are you a good person? Well, define what a person is. What is the point of being here? And I think another thing of like this good person thing is the story of Jesus. I might get this later, but like the story of Jesus is essentially, he is the best person and the worst happened to him. So as good as you might think you are you as good as, the historical story of Jesus? No, he's sinless. As bad as the things that are happening to you are you betrayed by all of your friends and family and your people? Are you tortured and ridiculed and spat on and skin ripped from your bones and then strung up on a cross and ridiculed and laughed at and mocked and murdered in front of your mother? Like, that seems extreme to happen to the best person. So, these things of like, why do bad things happen to good people? It seems like there's just an element of that within the story that's really deep. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why are there dirty people when there's so much soap in the world? Christianity, I believe, like soap, must be personally applied if it is to make a difference in our lives. So like, why are there bad things happening to good people? Maybe because you and I are not out there right now helping those people who are having bad things happen to them. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to be the hands and feet, as Nick Vucic said, the hands and feet of God on the planet, on earth as it is in heaven. Like, to bring that here. So maybe some of it's on us. Why are bad things happening to that poor person, that poor veterans on the street? Why? Maybe because you didn't give up your spare bedroom. Or I didn't give up my spare bedroom, I should say. I'm not putting it on you. Why do bad things happen to good people? Again, I said the story of Jesus is the ultimate example of this. All good, experienced the worst of the worst bad: betrayal, ridicule, tortured, death. Also, we don't really know what's bad in the moment. Like let's say you're running down the sidewalk and you're about to cross the street and you sprain your ankle. You sprain your ankle and it pops out and it's black and blue and it hurts. You're like, oh, why is this happening? I was trying to go down and do what Bruce just said, and which is like I was going to try and volunteer at the homeless shelter and I sprained my ankle. Like, why is this happening to me? It's like, maybe you were about to get hit by a car. Like, we don't know what's good or bad yet. Like, I went through breakups when I was younger that were hard, but thank God, because my kids wouldn't even exist. Like, you don't know. I tell this to my students all the time. It's like, I didn't get into this college. It's like, you don't know if that was good for you or not. Eliza Hamilton lost her son and her husband to like gun duels at a young age. She was so heartbroken. She started an orphanage. When Magic Johnson got that call of, hey, you have HIV, I'm guessing that's a tough call to get. But if he didn't get that call, he wouldn't be one of the biggest catalysts for change in the way that we view HIV and AIDS prevention. A lot of people don't even die from AIDS anymore. And part of it is because Magic Johnson got it and he had tremendous resources. So was it bad that he got it? Yeah, but also it probably gave him tremendous purpose. Before that, he was just like a womanizing basketball player. But now he's someone that saved lives. And I'm guessing that when he goes to bed at night, that means something. So we don't always know why bad things happen. Is it bad to get HIV? Yeah, I'm sure. Is it bad to lose your son and your husband? Yeah, I'm sure. Or Sidney Smith about losing his feet? Yeah. But also, it's more complicated than that. I believe it's more complicated than that. Another argument is it's just superstitious stories, outdated, not meant to be taken seriously. Many scientists now believe we understand consciousness through a narrative, that we understand just like, what is consciousness? We don't really know even what consciousness is. So come on, scientists, like we don't have everything figured out, okay? But we understand it through a narrative. Jonathan Haidt says in his book, The Righteous Mind, the human mind is a story processor, not a logic processor. We actually process things through story. When we see a cement truck, we don't see the metal and plastic and concrete and stuff like. We see a truck that is in a narrative that's going somewhere to build a building. Like we see the connections. So essentially, if the Bible is a blueprint for how to live, how do you explain that? Part of what I do and have done for a living is I take complicated ideas and I explain them to teenagers who just don't care. So I have to explain it to them in a way that makes sense to them. I don't know, guys. I think consciousness is probably really complicated. Like, why are we here is pretty complicated. What is this? I don't know if you've ever experimented with psychedelic, like drugs or medicines or whatever you want to call them, but an element of that is, whoa, I don't know anything. This is quite complicated. How do you explain something so complicated? Like, how do you explain Wi-Fi to a squirrel? Okay, like you have to break it down into something that they understand. And I think part of that, I really do, is through story. So if you look, the Bible isn't a book, it's 66 different books put together. 40 different writers over a period of 1,500 years, and there's overlap. So this image is so cool. It's included in my Paradox logo. I wanted to do that at the very top, like I did that on purpose because I just think it's so neat that there's cross references. So it's getting to what's true because this references that, references that. I just thought that was really, really neat. Like if you think of a perfect song, let's say a song came out tomorrow and overwhelmingly people from Utah to Florida to Maine to Seattle to Washington were all like, this is the best song. People like hip hop, people like country. They all are like, this is the best song. Black people, white people, old people, young people. This is the best song, right? If they said that, what, and you went up to the writer of the song, he said, how did you come up with this song? What would they say? They would probably say it came from somewhere else. I doubt that they'd say it's just from me. It's just me, and it's just something that I thought of. Like when you hear people talk about these like really monumental things, they say it comes from something above or divine. I have a friend who's a musician, professional musician. He's an atheist, and he says the same thing. He's like, but I don't believe in God, but like I don't know, it comes from somewhere, like somewhere else, right? The Christ story is a structure of all great stories. It's Star Wars, it's Harry Potter, it's the base structure of all of these stories. In North Korea, they follow like the same story for like the Kim family because it works. So it's the core of all great stories to explain morality, explain redemption, explain how to live life too. So to explain life's truths, we tell fables. That's how children learn important lessons. So I tell my kids, tortoise and the hare or something along those lines. We are merely children trying to make sense of something far more complex than we'll ever understand through the use of story. So there's a book in the Bible about Jonah who disobeys God and then he's swallowed by a fish for several days. Was he really swallowed by a fish? I don't know. I've never seen someone who survived inside of a fish for 3 days, so I'm skeptical. But I do think that there's something really true about that story. And if you're trying to explain to people why you should obey God, you might want to tell them in a story that they understand because we're not that different from children, guys. I don't think so. I think that we're still figuring it out. Just when kids are trying to figure out basic things like sharing, we're trying to figure out things like consciousness. We're trying to figure out things like morality. And we need stories. We need fables to do that, I think. The Bible is a guidebook to help us make sense of existence. Did it happen exactly as described, or is it sometimes fiction? Is sometimes fiction more able to articulate ideas better than fact? It's why we like Star Wars. But we like Star Wars because it talks about something deeply true. Sometimes fiction is better. Like it was Uncle Tom's Cabin, a fictional story that helped animate people to fight against slavery. It's deeper than facts or truth. It's truth about truth as a concept. It's trying to understand what truth is. And if you take just one story that's true, then it's only going to be, you're like, well, that's this and this. But if you talk about what is truth in general, and people don't know, there's a story in the Bible where Jesus is talking to Pontius Pilate, the guy who can save his life or give his life, or take his life, and he says, "What is truth?" People don't even know what true is. That's the thing. Like, how do you even know what's true? People were so convinced of so many things that now are proven to be not true. It's like we don't know. So maybe we need some sort of guidebook on helping us to understand what is true. Is there anything that is true that we can like stake our life on, that we can anchor as a rock? I in my journey for this, I think that's a big thing. I had a dinner with a woman named Africa Brooke, who's kind of really interesting. She's kind of like a self-help guru type, but she's wonderful. She's beautiful. She's really sweet. She was like, she's not a believer, but she said something like, I think that because I'm like a questioner, I'm like a curious, critical thinking person. She's like, I think you probably needed something that was like unquestionable. I was like, I guess, like I do question it, obviously, and that's how I got there. But I think I needed some sort of rock that like everything else might not be true, but this one thing is. I think just for like my sanity, I think that was something why I ended up landing on this. I think there's something to that for me personally. People say like I believe in science. Science is a process. Question, research, hypothesis, experiment, data analysis, conclusion, and communication. Okay, there's no contradiction between faith and science. That I just want to like dispel. There's no contradiction here. Okay. Science is a process of asking questions. What we're doing now is essentially part of like science. Okay. You experiment, you hypothesize, you ask questions. You know, science gives us an is, but it doesn't give us an ought. So this is interesting. Like, okay, if you're running a country, does it make logical sense to purge all of the people who are consumers or takers and not the ones who are producers? Nazism has flaws, obviously. Okay, I'm not an apologist for Nazism. And Nazism is logical. People who are old, people who are sick, people who are weak, and your country is struggling, you purge the weak. So it's evolution, survival of the fittest. You get rid of the weak. Like scientifically, why would that be bad? Morally, we understand how abhorrent that is, but scientifically, why would you not do that? Nazism lost the narrative lots of different ways, but the biggest one probably would be the racial purity stuff. They saw Albert Einstein as weak when Albert Einstein should have been on their side to make a bomb for them to win the war. So racism, you know, was obviously a major part of that of the flaw in the thinking of what is weak. But logically, it makes sense. So why do we see that as so wrong? We see it as wrong because we understand a moral code, but science can't get you there. I don't think. Today, almost all historians agree that Christianity moved many early modern intellectuals to study nature systematically. So basically, science came from the church, try to understand God's world better. Many top scientists are Christian, people of faith. There is no correlation between the best scientists in the world and atheism. Best scientists in the world are not atheists. There's no correlation there. And that's important to know. Some absolutely are. Stephen Hawking said he was an atheist, but he also said something very interesting. You know, Stephen Hawking, as much as he was an atheist and talked, you know, all about being an atheist and everything like that, Stephen Hawking also said the odds against a universe like ours emerging out of something like the Big Bang are enormous. I think there are religious implications. That's Stephen Hawking's, like the atheist. So even he says, I think there's some religious implications. So anyway, yes, a lot of top scientists are atheists, but a lot of top scientists are also Christian or religious. So there's no like connection there that's like clear, which I think is really important and interesting. So I believe in science. All of these old school scientists are people of faith. That's interesting. Okay. These people as well. These are modern scientists. So William T. Newsom, if you've heard of like Andrew Huberman Huberman's boss, evangelical Christian. John Lennox, you know, math chair at Oxford, evangelical Christian. Like, this is interesting. I don't know. I think this is really interesting. Francis Collins, who I think is on this one, Francis Collins went into the Human Genome Project to try and understand human genetics. He was the head of sequencing the human genome. Okay, went in as an evangelical Christian, came out. Went in as an atheist, came out an evangelical Christian. That's interesting. He explained it like human genetic code is basically. I may have a slide on it actually. No, okay. That it's like alphabet cereal. You get up in the morning, you come downstairs, and across the table, the alphabet cereal is right now. Good morning, sweetheart. I made a pot of coffee for you. Have a wonderful day. Can't wait to see you and give you a kiss when you get home later tonight. Love, your spouse. And you go, that just spilled on the table like that. Like, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't make logical sense. And science it needs to be connected with logical reasoning and sense. But that's what our DNA is. It's sentences, it's codes. Sentences have writers. Codes have coders. Unless you say, you know what? I think it did just spill like that. I think it did. It might have. It really might have. You know, what's that thing where they say like you have, 10 million monkeys on 10 million typewriters, they'll eventually write, Catcher in the Rye or something like that. Like, yeah, yeah. Is that more logical than someone sitting down at a typewriter and reading Catcher in the Rye? J.D. Salinger, right? I don't think so. I'm going to go on the side of what's more logical, that a code has a coder. So there's no proof. We're not going to solve this, but what we can do is go to where's the best evidence. And I think the best evidence goes there. Okay. I don't need faith or religion. There's no atheists in foxholes. I think that's a really important quote. I don't know who said it. Belief in a higher power is the only proven way to consistently break addictions, or 12 steps. Oh, I wrote additions, sorry. Addictions, a 12-step program, or endure unthinkable suffering. Like, it's the only way that we know to consistently break addiction, which is why the 12-step program has belief in a higher power in it. You have to believe in something bigger than yourself to overcome the harms of the world. Like, I think Jordan Peterson was talking about this. Like, what's the most real thing that you can think of? Maybe physical pain. Maybe physical pain is the most real thing that you can understand, or our little squirrel brains can understand. How do you overcome physical pain? You believe in something that's more important than physical pain. And how does that make sense? Like, women go through childbirth over and over and over again. And I watched my wife go through it 3 times. My goodness, that looked painful. But then she kept going back and doing it because you believe in something bigger than that pain. And that seems to be how people overcome the pain of addiction and things like that. Also, there's no atheist in a foxhole. There's a really interesting scriptural piece, and I don't know the scripture. Maybe some of you might be better at Bible than me, but like, it's essentially, it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And I always thought that was like, yeah, rich people are bad. Rich people aren't going to heaven. But an interpretation that I resonate with more is rich people don't feel like they need God. That someone like Sidney Smith, who loses his feet, need God. Someone like Nick Vujicic, who doesn't have any arms or legs, needs God. Otherwise, he will be a depressive, suicidal, nihilistic mess. But you have what you want. You have the things you need. You're driving a Range Rover. You have money in the bank. You have your health. I don't really need God. I'm good. I'm good. Maybe it's that. Maybe that's how the rich man can't enter the kingdom of heaven, because he thinks he doesn't want to. He thinks he doesn't need to. I don't know. I think that's better than like rich people are bad, because rich people give a lot to the church and give a lot to homeless people and help out. They might have gotten rich by making a patent for something that saved lives. Like, you don't know. I don't know. I think that's interesting. Faith gives us purpose, gives us an assignment, an aim. Suicide, mass shooting, nihilism, depression, and anxiety all occur at higher rates among non-believers. That's true. That's fact. How many of these mass shooters are regular churchgoers who have a church community, a small group, and they read the Bible every day? How many? Now, I'm not saying there aren't crazy Christians who have gotten off the rails, who are obsessed with the Bible, obsessed with literal terms of the Bible, and go out and bomb abortion clinics. I know that happens. Is that a misrepresentation of Jesus's word? I think so. Remember there were those bracelets when I was a kid? It was like WWJD. What would Jesus do? I don't think it would be bomb an abortion clinic. I think he would get upset and heartbroken over abortion, perhaps, but I don't think he would kill people. And I think that's very clear in the historical record and the biblical record. So don't take people who abuse children and are obsessed with the Bible as actually doing what the Bible says. I think they're missing it. I do. I think that the Bible's powerful and people use powerful things in terrible ways. But again, I don't know. I might be wrong. I'm just putting stuff out there for you to think. That's it. Truly. People say I'm spiritual, not religious. I don't like organized religion. Well, is an unorganized belief system better than an organized one? That's that's the first thing. Is like organization is how you get things done, like it's discipline. What's to stop you from merely just making things up, following your own heart, your own instincts? Like, do you just know how to do life properly? Like, have you figured this out? I sure as heck haven't. I don't know what I'm doing. I need a guidebook. If people just say, I don't like the organized religion, I don't like the rules of religion, then what is guiding you? What is your map? Who made your map? I want to go to a map maker. If I'm in a faraway land that I don't know where I'm at, which is seems like what life is like for so many people, including myself. It's like, I don't know how to do this right. I want to go to someone who knows the landscape, who made a map, who knows the landscape. The creator knows the land, knows the landscape, made you a map. But otherwise, what is your map? Aren't you just wandering around? How are you not going to get lost? So I don't know. I think that you do need some organization. So you don't just create out of thin air. Materialism, only believe what is provable. Okay, not everything that counts can be counted, is something that Einstein said. The most animating elements of being a human, the things that motivate us most, are things like love and purpose, things that aren't material and can't be measured or proven. So how can you believe in love? Maybe people have experienced it. You've experienced love, so you go, all right, well, because I've experienced it, then I believe in it. But that's not materialism. Like if you say like, well, I think you could put up an EKG and a whole bunch of like a moving MRI on someone's brain, and you could have them fall in love, and you could see brain signals start flashing and their heart rate start changing and stuff like that. You could. I believe that. But couldn't you replicate that with someone who finds like Jesus? Like I'll go to a church service and they'll be like big, like choloed out dudes with neck tattoos, but there's tears streaming down their faces. Like it's worshiping, singing at the top of their lungs. I'm guessing that MRI would look the exact same. I think it would. So, okay, so that's proof of love, but that's also proof of faith. Or it's not. But if love exists and it's not quantifiable in an easy way, well, I gave her flowers, so that means I love her. It's like, no. Then maybe faith is the same way, something along those lines. The concept of like wokeness, critical social justice, it actually started largely in the new atheist movement. I had a very prominent new atheist named Colin Wright, a biologist on my podcast, and he broke this down on my podcast about how, the kind of critical social justice woke stuff started because they needed some sort of guidebook on what is right and what is wrong. Well, racism's wrong, so I'll be an anti-racist kind of thing. It fills that container that seems to exist in us for a moral guidebook. If you look at like woke people, it's like they're the moral police. I know what morality is. And people who are largely woke, not all, because some churches have been taken over by that for sure, but a lot of them are atheists because they need to like understand what is good or bad, and they don't have the Bible to say this is good or this is bad. This idea of I can't have faith. I've tried and I can't. Okay, I have people in my family that say that. I've tried and I can't. We all have faith in things. Okay, belief means living it. You believe in the things you live out. You believe the roof won't cave in or the red light will stop oncoming traffic. We would have so much anxiety over everything all the time if we didn't have faith in certain systems and institutions and construction crews. I mean, your phone could just blow up right now. All that kinetic energy, or like, I don't know. What is it? Not kinetic energy, potential energy. We all have faith in things. We do. I trust that I'm going to go through that green light and people will stop at that red light. And you say, well, that's not faith. That's just after a lot of experience of going through that over and over and over again. Right. But faith is that too. I mean, there's a reason why my faith is getting deeper, whatever, 2.5 years into my journey after I've had a lot of experience over and over and over again. It makes sense. It's the same thing. You have a track record. If you believe in giving to the needy, you give to the needy, not say the words. If you believe in God, you live as the religious texts tell you to live. It isn't attending church, wearing a cross, or saying that you do. So if you believe in something, you live it out. So there's a lot of people that say, like, I believe in Jesus. It's like, well, are you living the way that he told you to live? I believe in giving to the poor. Are you actually giving to the poor? And what does it mean to just, is it what you say or is it what you do? I think what you believe is actually what you do. I think so. I think that's more honest. I think that's more accurate. It's just harder. But I think that it's like you have faith in the things that you live out. People say it doesn't make sense. The opposite is true. Francis Collins, as I said, led the Human Genome Project and argues that DNA is proof of intelligent life. So he would say, and he is smarter than me when it comes to genetics and biology. He's a medical doctor, college professor, or whatnot. Okay. He says DNA is proof of intelligent design. So that's something. Think about how many things in this world doesn't make sense to you. I guess if we don't make sense to you. From technology to biology, just because you don't understand something doesn't make it untrue. Like, I don't really know how a microwave works. You know what I mean? Like, but it works. I don't really know. Um, just because it doesn't make sense to you, a lot of things don't make sense to you. It doesn't make them untrue. It just means maybe you should learn a little bit more about it or just trust. I don't need to learn about my microwave to just say, I'm going to put my food in there and I want to heat it up. It doesn't make it untrue. I just don't know how the microwave works. So microwaves aren't real. You know, there aren't any examples of Bible stories that are disproven from the flood to the virgin birth to resurrection. Okay. Timelines of Genesis count days even before Earth revolved around the sun and counted days as we know now. So like, it's not, you can't disprove it the same way. It's not like that didn't happen and here's proof that it didn't happen. You know, we don't know. We don't know. I don't think that it's going to be like, I can prove that this didn't happen. You know, you can't prove that the great flood didn't happen. There's some evidence that it did, maybe some evidence that it didn't. You can't prove that Mary wasn't, a virgin when she was pregnant. You say, well, that has never happened before. I mean, it's happened in crocodiles, it happens in frogs. So it does happen in the animal kingdom. Just want to say that. But right, there's no record of it happening in humans. But that's kind of the point. The point is that it's supernatural. It's not natural that a woman can just get pregnant miraculously. She's just sticking to her story, right? Like, no, you need something supernatural because we know the natural world, that's not the way it works. So you need something supernatural. That's the story. That's the whole freaking point. That's the point. You can't just raise from the dead. That's not natural. Correct. That's why it's a big deal. That's why it's a big deal. That's the whole reason why it's a big deal. If people did rise from the dead, then it wouldn't be a big deal when he did it. Right. Right. Like, it doesn't make sense. Right. It doesn't make sense. So how could that possibly be true? What if it was true? What if it was? What if it was true that the gospel stories are absolutely true from the virgin birth to the resurrection? What would it look like? If that happened 2,000 years ago, what would it look like today? I think it would look like it looks like now. Like, it would change the whole world. So, you know what I mean? All right. Mathematics is a code and codes are designed. Mathematics is proof of a design system. Houses have architects, whether or not you see them. Like, it doesn't make sense for there to be a God. I disagree. What we understand about physics and the natural world is that codes have coders, that things that are created have a creator. So we know that about everything, but then right down to the Big Bang, what started that? Everything contained in something the size of a pinhead. What started that? Well, that just miraculously happened. Well, now you're being illogical if that's what you think. No. Like, stay consistent with the way you understand things on a greater scale is what I would say. I thought this is kind of cool. The numerical value of the Hebrew word for love is also 13, hava. Many biblical scholars, some believe this means that the deepest mystical level, the concept of God's oneness, is inextricably linked to the concept of love. So love and God have the same number value. So it's like, what is God? It's like love. I thought that was kind of cool. The idea that doesn't make sense. The idea that everything came from nothing, that all existence just happened, or is a coincidence, arguably makes less sense than being designed. So I have some typos here. Obviously, I think that makes less sense. I could never believe no matter what. Okay. You just no matter what, you could never believe. That is not a logic base. That's a faith claim. This is Sam Harris, strong atheist. He said, if someone doesn't value evidence, what evidence are you going to provide to prove that they should value it? If someone doesn't value logic, what logical argument could you provide to show the importance of logic? That's a good point. Is there any evidence I could show you? Any evidence to get you to believe in God? No, nothing that you could ever show me could get me to believe in God. Well, then it's not an evidence claim then. Now it's a faith claim. Is there any evidence I could show you that says you don't love your husband or your wife? No. I know it. I know it here. I just know it. All right, well then that's a faith claim. That's fine. But don't say that it's a logic claim if you, by definition, said there's no evidence I could show you. Because here's the thing. Richard Dawkins, other than our famous atheist, Peter Boghossian, who I love, but like he's a strong atheist. They said that if the clouds parted and God showed up and God said, hey, I'm God, I'm real, end the debate, I'm real, later, clouds close. They said that still wouldn't cause them to believe. They said, I'd have to think it was a mass psychosis hallucination. So you wouldn't believe even if God opened up and talked to you. No. How is that logical? I think that these atheists have faith in their atheism. That's the way I see it. So historical apologists, there's a whole bunch here. I'll put this on YouTube for you guys. I'll send it out. Thomas Aquinas, C.S. Lewis, who I love C.S. Lewis. His book, Mere Christianity, is my late grandmother's favorite book, and it really changed my life. It's so good. Contemporary apologists, William Lane Craig is really good. Alan Pantiga, he's a philosophy professor. Stephen C. Meyer, I really liked. He was on Joe Rogan. He was really good. Lee Strobel, Frank Turek, Timothy Keller. There's a lot. At the end of the day, though, I mean, thank you guys for sitting here. I don't want to take questions or whatever. Like at the end of the day, I don't know. If you have free will, or if you believe that you have free will, okay, to make conscious choice, a choice that will guide you and get you to aim at the ideal way to live. Sinning is when you miss the ideal. Sinning is when you miss where you're supposed to be. That's all it is. We're all sinners. It's not like that. Oh, how dare you be a sinner? It's like, no, we're all sinners. We're all going to miss the perfect way to be. Jesus is the ideal. That is what Christianity is. It's the belief that Jesus, Son of God, came to earth, lived a sinless life, and died for your sins. It's just like this idea of like, have you ever lied? Yeah. Have you ever cheated? Probably. Have you ever used God's name in vain? Probably. Have you done things you're not supposed to do that are pretty ugly? Yeah. Okay. So by your own admission, you're all these terrible things. Okay. Despite you say that you're a good person. I say I'm a good person, but I've done all these things. Okay. So what's the penalty? We believe in justice. What's the penalty? I mean, there needs to be justice. We believe in justice, that bad begets bad and good begets good. So like you've done all these bad things. Who pays for it? That story is Jesus came here and said, I did that. Like, how about this? Think about the worst thing you've ever done. The worst thing you've ever done. Okay, don't have to tell me. Okay. Think about the worst thing you've ever done. Could you have been arrested for that? Maybe. Okay. I've probably driven when I had too much to drink or something. Okay. I could have gotten arrested, been facing, 3 months in jail. As I'm in front of the judge, he says, you're facing 3 months in jail. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your respect of your peers, blah, blah, blah. As he's about to bring down the gavel, someone walks in and says, I got it. I'll do it. I didn't drive drunk ever, but I'll take his prison sentence. I'll just do it. That's the story. And then Oh my gosh, how can I repay you? Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you like saved my life. Oh my gosh, how can I repay you? Just say thank you and really mean it. And you know, it's kind of it. It's like, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for dying for me. You're real. You really did this for me. You really did this for me. Thank you. That's the story. And I think that's a really beautiful story. I think it's something that we can relate to. Um, Religious people are happier. They're more charitable. They have better relationships and are able to overcome suffering better. This is an interesting stat. 50% of first marriages end in divorce. 78% of second marriages end in divorce. And according to a 1997 study, couples who pray together regularly have a divorce rate of 1 in 1,152. So you might say, well, they just stick in bad marriages. Maybe, but what's a bad marriage? Like, is it just all bad marriages, or is it marriages that have deep, deep low points and deep and high points? Like, isn't marriage, you guys are married, but like, I guess it's like, it's tough. It's ups and downs. It's like, I want to strangle you, but you're also my favorite person on the planet. I mean, like that's the game. That's the commitment, and because you pray together, you're working towards something bigger and greater than yourselves. And I think a lot of divorce is like, this isn't working out for me. It's like, well, it's not just about you. It's about you, your place in this world, your children, generational things. Understanding, then faith, not the other way around. That's tricky for deep thinking, critical thinking people. It really is. Like, we want to understand and then we'll get faith. But this doesn't really work like that. And I've learned that because that's what took me so long to get here, is like, I wanted full understanding before I have the faith. But I just got to a point where I was like, look, now at this point, now I need to jump in the pool. Test the pH levels of the pool. Test the temperature here. Test the temperature there. Da 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 da. Like, at some point, you're just like, all right, I've done some testing. Now I got to jump in. And I think that that's hard for people that are really analytical. I have friends who are scientists who really struggle with this because, like, I just want to get all the information I can. I just don't think it works like that. But you guys have a choice. You may choose this operating system, the operating system of like being a Jesus follower over all the others, because you need an operating system. Whether you recognize it or not, this is atheist scientists know this. You need some sort of way to orient your life, some sort of operating system. I believe this one is the best. But you're going to pick one whether you recognize it. I'm not going to run an operating system, then you're not going to work. Computers need an operating system. Keep searching, keep questioning. And that's the show. I would love to hear, any thoughts that you guys have, any questions. I'm here for it. I appreciate you coming. I don't know if this was interesting or not, but I hope it was.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I have kind of a big question, which
Please.
is that you talked about Jonathan Haidt and how he talks about how we understand things through stories.
Mm-hmm.
And as I have been following you on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
my biggest question really is like, what is your story? Not just the logical points of ending up
Oh, how
in
I got here?
Yes. What's your story?
I have a YouTube on it too. When I got baptized, I did a podcast on it. But the first time that I said that I was Christian was in 2018. I had a hemorrhagic stroke. I was healthy, but I was severely dehydrated, and I had two kids at the time. My youngest one was little. He was a year old, a little over a year old. And I got rushed to the ICU basically, and I was kind of in and out of consciousness. They weren't sure if I was going to survive, and they said, they're like testing to see, like, are you going to die? So they're like, do you have a faith preference? And I was there with my friend who was a Christian at the time, my wife, who's been a Christian since we met. And I was like, yeah, Christian. So I think that my back was up against the wall, but essentially my story is a long process. It wasn't just like a boom. It wasn't, it was constantly questioning things. It was like, this is nonsense. No, maybe it's not. I had like, as you start looking for a contact lens or a needle in a haystack, you start to find needles. And I started by, you know, I read Sam Harris books, and I read Dawkins books, and then I watched a lot of debates. I like YouTube better than books sometimes. So I watched a lot of debates between atheists and Christians. I just kept being like, huh. I wanted to prove Christianity as nonsense, but it just wasn't happening. And then as I just started like embracing it a little bit more, like, all right, I'll go to church. Okay. And then I'll go through the motions of it. It's like fake it till you make it. As I started doing that more and more and more, it took I mean, years. Then things started to get better in my life. It started to get better and better and better. You know, I started to become a kinder person. I was held of like, oh, you probably shouldn't do that. Probably shouldn't do that. And then I just didn't do it. And then what's really interesting, and then I got baptized in 2022, my 40th birthday. And that was hard for me because no one rolled their eyes more than like a born again Christian. Like I thought it was the corniest thing ever. But that's what was so hard for me to do. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going all in. I'm committing my life to this. Once I did that, then it was like, okay, now I really have to like, you know, adhere to this. But it started with that. It started with like I really want to drink a beer. Like an alcoholic who says like, I really want to drink a beer, but I shouldn't. And what happened that's fascinating is it got to like, I don't even want a beer anymore. You start to become uncomfortable with sin. And it doesn't make sense, guys. I don't know what to tell you. It doesn't make sense. There's a woman named Jackie Hill Perry who was a lesbian, lived a life. She was gay, and she believes and lives now. She has a family. She has a husband. She has kids. She's like, I was purged from that. And you could roll your eyes all day. And like I did for so much of my life too. But there are things in my life that I was like, it would be impossible for me not to want this all the time. You know, addictive things and things like that. It's impossible. If you've been addicted to something, it's like, it's impossible that I'll never want a cigarette again. But you can get over that. And there's so many things like that. I got to get better. So my pitch, like my story. It's just been such a long process. It wasn't just one thing that hit me. It was a long, slow process. And then I would say the day that I like fully accepted Jesus would be the day that I got baptized, which it isn't the same for people. Some people just like, they come to it and then they get baptized later as like a public display. But for me, it was that day. It was like, I came up from the water and I felt different, and I still struggled and I still sin. I've made so many mistakes since that day, but I have a way to get back now. I'm not just wandering through the wilderness with nowhere to go. I screw up and I feel bad. People say like, when you sin, you go, oh, my dad's going to kill me. Instead, it's like, I screwed up. Like, Dad, I need a hug. It's like that. It's not like this punishing God. Like we punish our kids because we love them. You know, like you don't want to just be like, do whatever you want. That's not loving. So we get punished for in that kind of way. And I see that in a lot of things throughout my life, like my health issues and a bunch of other things. I was just a searcher though. I think that's the best way I can explain it. I was just a searcher, and I was embracing it. I started a Bible study. I started praying for people. I started praying for things, and I got them. Because it was a sincere prayer. It was like, oh, all right, let me just go through this motion. It's like, it was sincere. I was like, on my knees, God, please deliver me from this or bring me this. And it showed up or it happened. What? So that gave me a personal track record, but I don't share that stuff much. And like, that's why I'm bad at this story. Honestly, it's because like, I don't think that's going to win people over as much. I'm trying to like be a fisher of men. I'm trying to like win people over, you know, like, because it's been so good to me. I don't know. It's a terrible answer.
No, no, that was, I think that was a great answer,
Oh,
and I think both are true. I think you can share your personal journey and story of how you ended up as a Christian, and that can be compelling to people to want to become searchers. Same with, having a logical rationale for why you think a certain way or what connects to what also can be compelling and interesting to call
yeah.
people to
Yeah.
question for themselves. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still going through my journey too. Like my faith is getting deeper, you know, and it's generally it seems like it's through hardship, like me leaving my job, and there's a lot of changes happening in my life right now. Like that seems to be bringing me, because I go, this is really hard. No atheist in a foxhole, right? So you turn more to faith, and then you get better. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what I found. Yeah. Brad, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just some thoughts. I mean, I'll preface with I grew up very much in church, deeply went to, all Christian schools and even a Christian university, and I left there no longer a believer, but then moved around, adulted long enough to kind of find a lot of the things that culturally we've tried to use to replace,
Yeah.
you mentioned wokeism, and I thought that was interesting because kind of I think we're close in age. For me, the new atheism thing when I was, in my early
Yeah.
20s was pretty convincing in those debates, the
Mm.
Christopher Hitchens and the Sam
Yep.
Harris. I actually have a few books signed by Sam Harris. From I lived in San Diego for a long time, and he had a book club up in LA,
Uh-huh.
or they would often go to LA. Um, so I'd go up there. But over time, I kind of started to recognize some of what I'd interpreted earlier in my life as errors in not necessarily Christianity, but Christians,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
just very human. And when you are absorbed in some of the things that I think people innately look for in ideologies and belief systems, it can easily become hijacked by um, these kind of dogmatic magnetisms towards like kind of novel things. So like, when I was growing up, like Harry Potter came out, and Harry Potter to a certain group of Christians was like evil and you couldn't touch it. Whereas now, it's like, you know, there are a billion examples of that type of dynamic with wokeness, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like any little thing becomes taboo, and you're almost more correct the more taboos you know about.
Yeah.
And and you can constantly correct people without actually ever working on yourself. And I found that I've kind of been circling back. And my brother's a pastor, so it's been like relatively easy for me to kind of come back into the fold, and I'm no longer the jerk at the dinner table. But to see that, okay, well, that's just a human thing.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
just a thing that people do. We're kind of tribal, and we're attracted to like novel, like new shiny things, and
Mhm.
especially things that don't require anything of us, and we can feel good about ourselves.
It's easy.
But Christianity, like the realness of it, like I kind of came to it in that the only people, rapidly approaching, I'm 38 this year. Um, the only people's lives that I envy, and I do well. I've traveled a lot, and all these things, but the only people whose lives I kind of envy are my friends who are Christians
Same
essentially,
right
and
here.
who's stuck with it. Yeah. And they're
Yeah.
the people whose lives I see most evidently like they have peace, they have direction, they have community. And the rest of us have been, and far fewer of them are dosed up on Lexapro and
Right. I know.
all the things that the rest of us are using to get by.
Yeah.
So it's like
I do.
it's been kind of a magnet back. But you just hit like a lot of these interesting things. And I was just talking to my brother because I think that like the way that you talked about it, I thought was interesting because I think it's really relevant to people like me. Whereas like in going back to church, I've noticed that a lot of times, like, especially in smaller towns, a lot of those people like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but the worlds are a little smaller. Um, and there's less to contend with, I think. I guess maybe not like philosophically necessarily, but like you've said, like it was a bit of a battle for you
Oh
to
yeah. It
kind of
really was a
come
long
out.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I think because you're not being supported by the world in that
No.
journey. In a place like Los
Right.
Angeles, you're especially not.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's nice to hear people take that journey where it's like, no, no, it took me a lot because I'm still kind of working through a lot of that. But and the only other thing I I thought to mention was when you mentioned uh kind of like organized religion and kind of the naysayers to that concept. My pushback on that line of thinking, because
Yeah,
I run into that a
please.
lot too, and I've said it
Yeah, yeah.
before. But organized religion, it acts as its own form of kind of like peer review for people of faith to kind of like distill it, because like this has stood the test of time. Like it's seen a lot of different cultural changes and
Mhm.
things, and it still applies. And I think that we need kind of some sort of organization to kind of like figure out how to adapt an ancient faith to kind of a modern time. And then you have the personal, relationship as well. But it just came to mind when you said that. I was like, oh yeah, you know what? But it kind of does, it acts like the organization is good to have, I think.
It is, and
But
I
yeah, that
think
was,
there's different levels of organization. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. Isn't it funny how like Harry Potter was like demonic, but like J.K. Rowling is a Christian. Like they didn't see that this isn't like this is a direct connection. You didn't see that anyway.
yeah.
But like how much structure is interesting because a lot of like more Orthodox or even Catholic people look down upon Protestants as like you're just gonna take scripture and make it into whatever you kind of want. And then the Protestants look at the Catholics and like, you're just focused on the dogmatism way too much. And you're kind of doing against what Jesus said, which is like, you like upholders of the law, you're missing the point. So I think that I think that's also like where you go. So you go from like the atheists to the believers, but then even when the believers, then it's like, well, which faith? And then it's like, the Buddhists and the Christians, and then you go into Christianity, and that's like, you just keep going down. And then even within their own church, there's like, the debates and stuff like that. But I don't know. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that you want to have your own personal relationship with Jesus, and you're going to have, you know, like the conversations, if they just help you to kind of understand everything better. I think that is like what peer review is. I think that's the idea is you do question that stuff. And not everyone does. My grandma was just one of those like childlike faith people, just yep, I'll just take it at face value. There's something really beautiful about that. In some ways I am really jealous about that because that's not really the way that I'm built. But I'm finding I'm becoming built like that more. Like I'm as I pray like really boldly, or I get in like a tough spot in my life and I pray really boldly and then it gets answered. It's not always in the time, definitely not in the timing that I want it to get answered typically, but like definitely not in the way either that I want it to, but in a way that's like better. It's like it's better in like a not in the way that I and my little monkey brain thinks is better, but like in like a way that I look back in time, I go, oh, that was better. You know, it's the day I had my stroke. This is an interesting example. So like the day I had my stroke that I was explaining to you, Sarah's like, um, it was on September 11th, 2018. Okay. So that morning I took my son who was 1 year old to the doctor. He had to get a shot because it was before RFK. But he had to get a shot. Right. So he got a shot and as he felt that pinch in his arm and he looked at me and he just goes like this. He goes, "Ah." Like, why did you do this? You caused me the most physical pain that I've ever felt in my short little life. Why did you do this to me? And I was trying to explain to him, like, buddy, no, this is this is a vaccine for this and that. It's gonna make you safer. It's gonna be better for you. I know it hurts now, but it's actually something that's good for you. You just don't understand. And he's like, bro, I'm 9 months old. Like, I don't know what you're saying. I just know that this hurts. And then now whatever this is, 6 years later, 7 years later, I can be like, do you understand why you get it now? Yeah, I can. Okay. Well, that afternoon, I got back from the doctor's office. I started getting these crazy headaches and I, basically had to go to the emergency room. They took me by ambulance to the ICU and all this stuff. And while I was getting put into the ambulance, I was like, why is this happening? It was the same. It was so crazy. It was the same exact feeling and face that my son had getting the shot. And now it's like, I look back, I'm like, oh, that's why I had that stroke. That was Thank you. Thank you for giving me the stroke and getting me through it the way that I did. I have a big dark spot in my brain. I'll show you the brain image. It's nuts. Big dark spot in my brain, but like I'm good. And I understand a lot more about what that did for me, how it humbled me, how it made me, change my priorities in life, how it brought me, in so many beautiful things that I didn't understand at the time. But it was so interesting that happened within like 5 hours of each other with my son. But I'm gonna email this out, this video, the link to the thing if you sign up on the email link. I appreciate you guys, and honestly, like this is the thing I love like more than anything. My church asked me to run their apologetics program, which is kind of cool. It's like a really big, or it's a fast growing church in LA. They're doing an apologetics like online course. If you have any questions, like I love talking about this, you can email me. And we can, talk about it anytime. I really appreciate you guys coming on here, and it's going to be recorded so you can share it with other people, or you can just go over it yourself. But like, as you're in this journey, like this is, I believe it. And I there's nothing I believe more. And I'm going through it more and more and more. And like, I just had to dive in. And once I dove in, still don't always understand it. That's kind of the point. That's the faith of it. So really appreciate you guys for getting up on a Saturday morning and spending your time with me. Really do. And thank you guys for supporting the Instagram and all of that kind of stuff. It's really, really cool. So thank you.
Thank you.